Hi, in this video we're going to talk about the Copyright Scavenger Hunt project. In this project you will create a scavenger hunt activity designed to guide students or peers through information about copyright, fair use, or plagiarism. So what is a scavenger hunt? Well, this is a style of instructional activity that might be as old as the World Wide Web itself. A scavenger hunt, also sometimes called a treasure hunt, is a guided research activity using one or more teacher-selected websites. Students must answer a set of questions based on the information found in the linked sites, and the questions are provided within the scavenger hunt activity. So the overall topic for this project is copyright and fair use, but this is a huge area with lots of details. We don't expect that you to become legal experts or cover every single facet of these topics. Rather, you need to pick one topic in this area, focus your activity on that. For example, let's say that you're a middle school teacher. You might want to do a project that focuses on illegal music downloads or plagiarized essays. You might want to provide an activity for other teachers to lead them through some fair use guidelines. Just pick a topic that's appropriate for your situation and your interests. Some possible topics might be fair use for teachers or fair use for web designers. Could be public domain resources for web designers, or it could be copyright basics for the web, or Creative Commons essentials, plagiarism on the internet, or even peer-to-peer file sharing. So after you've selected a topic, then you start to look for information on the internet. A Google search is often a good place to start, simply by searching copyright, fair use, or plagiarism. Select one or more credible websites with information about your topic. The information on this site will be used by your learners to search for answers to the questions during the scavenger hunt. You're going to write 10 or more questions that can be answered using those websites, and then you're going to write answers for each of these questions. You'll use these question and answers for the scavenger hunt activity. And so you can see the example, the scavenger hunt example that we provide, and you can see the different components that it has. So you can see from this example, it essentially contains of one page, that is the scavenger hunt, lists the questions, and then it lists the websites, and then there's an answer key that provides the answers to these. In addition to this, you also have a downloaded worksheet. And you'll know some other components that we expect, and be sure to always check the rubric, but that in addition to the scavenger hunt activity page and the answer key page, you're going to have an external style sheet, the student worksheet document, and then some custom bullet images. So now looking at this specific page, I'm going to go through and show you how I created this. The goal is not for you to copy exactly what I've done, but rather for you to see the basics of how this is done. So the first thing I'm going to do is create a new file. You'll notice that it's HTML5 doc type. And the first thing that I always do when I create a new file is I save it. So I'm going to save this in my 502 folder called scavenger.html and hit save. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to adjust my layout just a little. Make sure I have my CSS panel available. I'm in split screen mode. And the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to title it. So with HTML5, typically people will start with a container just like they would when they were using XHTML. And so this is just a place to put everything. And there's the closing container. And then, as we've talked about before, it's always good to comment out your code, because it helps you and other web designers and developers when they're looking at your code. So then within the container, I tend to often start with a header tag. This is one of the new HTML5 elements. And then a section. And you can always add in information there too, text, to help you remember where it is. And I tend to often do this from the code view in split. You could always do completely code view. And keep in mind that you can often, if you prefer, go to Insert, Layout Objects, and do one of the tags this way if you want to. Often with HTML5 tags, it's just easier, I find, to simply type them in. So I'm going to add a footer. And so this is, and now if I click over to the right, I can see the basic sections coming up. Once again, I can go through and comment out my code. And keep in mind you can always use the coding buttons on the side. Just for the illustration purposes, it's a lot faster for me to do it this way. I'm going to jump up in my header tag and I'm going to highlight it and I'm going to just put the title of my site. And then within this, I'm going to have within my section, and you can have more than one section, but in this case I'm probably just going to use one for this site. I'm going to type in learner description so you can see that. And then I'm going to have some other information. And then in the example, if you remember, we have this off to the right, so I'm actually going to use the side tag for that. And so this is where it comes helpful to have a split view. So I'm going to go over here and put in aside. And then I'm going to comment out. Okay, so you can start seeing it take shape. So what I'm going to do right now is I'm going to copy in all of my text that I have, and then I'm going to go through with adding styles so you can see me go through this process. So in this case, I'm going to go under the side and just copy it in. So you'd see something like this. So just like that, I've added all my information in here, and you can see that I've used a basic H2 tag here. I've used a strong tag here. Okay, just like that, I've typed in all my information, so this would be the stuff that you've done ahead of time. And in my case, I've already made some of these links, and you can see that I've used H3 tags for my headings here. I have some numbered lists, and so you can see the ordered list there, and some more links. And so what I'm going to do now is I'm just going to start adding some basic styles so you can see this take shape. By now, you should start learning this process and feeling more comfortable with this. But let's go forward and see. Okay, so now I'm going to click up here, and this is the header tag. I'm going to click on this plus sign and pull this up, and I'm going to choose less specific because in this case I only have one header, and that's fine. I'm going to, rather than have this document only, I'm going to have an external style sheet. I'm going to click OK. When I do that, it prompts me to save it in my local root. So I'm going to save it in my styles folder, and I'm going to call it Scavenger. So with the header, the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to decide the color I want. In this case, I know the hex values. You can always click apply and you can start seeing it take shape. So I'm going to go font weight bold. Font size, I'm going to choose 1.8, and I'm going to change this to M, so it's going to adjust based on how I set up my default font. My body tag, which ideally I would have done first. I get so excited though about these HTML5 tags that I just jump in here. So the border, I'm going to choose a border. I'm going to put a border under it, and I'm going to choose a solid thin. Hit apply so you can see that, do that. So I'm going to do two last things. I'm going to go to box, so I'm going to focus on my padding and my margins. So I'm just going to do a margin at the top at 10 pixels. I'm going to do a margin bottom, some white space under it at 15. And then I'm just going to choose 5 pixels all the way around. Hit apply, and that's looking good. So now I'm going to actually jump to my body, which is often what I do first. And so you notice that when I did this, it chose the body and the paragraph where I just want the body. I want to make sure it's in my external style sheet. And this is where I choose the base font for my page. So I'm going to do an Arial family. I'm going to do 100%. So I'm going to do a background color of 033. Hit apply. Hit OK. Alright, so that's starting to look okay. You can see it's still tough to read, but that's because I still haven't done anything to some of my other tags here. So for instance, even my header tag, and this is another way to do it. When I see it here, I can do background. You can see that it starts to come up. Enter. Choose a white background, and you can see it come up. Another way to do it, rather than doing that, in this case, because everything's in a container, if you remember, I can choose my container, make sure that looks good, Scavenger, it's in my external style sheet. So this is where I can choose a background color of white. Hit apply, I can see that work. So this is where I can choose the width that I want. So while I've done some fixed width with some of my past pages in this course, this is one where I'm going to use the M, so it's going to adjust. Over here for the margin, I'm going to uncheck this and I'm going to do auto for right and left, and that's going to center my div in the web browser. And choose overflow to auto. Hit apply. And we can see some things starting to take shape here. So now if I go to section, I'm going to click on the plus sign for section. In this case, I'm going to choose less specific because I just want to do section, make sure it's in my external style sheet. And so I'm going to add a little white space around mine. So I'm going to do padding 5. And I'm going to change my font size to 0.9 em. So now if I start moving down, and it's good to every now and then do a file, save all, preview it. So you can see that, and then if we look at the one we showed earlier for the example, you can start seeing everything take shape. You can see that the learner description's out there, the video. There's definitely some things down here, some styling with the heading that I'd want to focus on, and my footer. The next thing that we will do is we will go ahead and add the YouTube video. And so here this is. Now the YouTube, I'm going to click on share. You'll notice the embed option. You have a few options here to change the size of it. I'm going to choose the smaller one. You have also some options down here where you can show suggested videos. I tend to not do that because you don't know what else is going to show up. Sometimes you're going to find it's better off to use the old embed code. So you can play with that. The biggest problem you have here is when you want to validate is that this allow full screen in the frame border it gets upset with. But everything else works pretty good. So I'm going to hit pause. You can hear it auto playing. I'm going to choose my source code. And if you remember, I can see where I put add video. And so in source code, I'm going to paste that. And I'm going to actually get rid of my frame border and allow full screen just to help validation later. Alright, so that's in the side. So what we're going to do is we're going to now add some styles to the side to take care of that. Well, first let's look to see that we have the right thing. And actually we have section, right? So properties for section. What threw me off was I could see the 0.9. So sometimes you get going so fast that I'm going to hit that, and we're just going to do less specific, less specific. It's in Scavenger. And there's not much I have to do here. Some of the main things that I want to do is I want it to float right. And to help deal with these float issues, I'm going to say clear right. Hit apply. See how it went. Two other things I'm going to do is I'm going to add some padding. And so I'm going to add some padding on the left and the bottom. And you could add more if you find that you need it. You might find that you want to add some on the right or the top. That's fine as well. And then I'm just going to choose auto for the width and hit OK. So that's looking pretty good. Just going to do 3 more things. And I'm done with this. Once again, the goal isn't for you to copy everything that I'm doing, but for rather you to see the basic ways that these are done. So for the learner description, so I have some text I'm going to put in here for the learner description, but more than anything with the learner description, what I want to do is I want to add a class to it. And so there's a few ways that you can do this. I can add a paragraph tag and then a class. Or I could add a span tag, and so there's a number of ways that you can do this, but I'm just going to put a paragraph tag around it, okay, and it gave a little space. But more than anything, what I want to do is, with this selected, I want to create a class. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to go over to the CSS panel, I'm going to hit refresh, and I'm going to hit new CSS rule. I'm going to choose class from the drop-down. It wants me to give it a name, and I'm going to call this learners. I'm going to make sure it's in my external sheet. And this is where I'm going to add some CSS to style just that one little bit. The great thing about a class is that you can then use that multiple times. And so in this case, just a few things that I want to do. For instance, I want it to be a smaller font than my main body font that I have in my section. So I'm going to do 0.8 em. and then I'm going to change the color. Alright. So now if I go back here, if I go down here, you can see that you can go down here and select learners, and just like that it added it to it. So you notice that you can play with the spacing here. For instance, if you want the side to be further up here, you could always move that up, and you'll see that it wrapped around. You could also play with the paragraph and do some things to remove some of the spacing to top align this if you wanted to. Right now I'm going to jump down here, and I'm going to go to my heading 2. I'm going to hit cancel. I hit the pencil rather than the new CSS rule, whereas I've not done anything yet with H2. So I'm going to be less specific, H2. I'm going to click OK. And what I'm really wanting to do here is I want to add a color, and I want to get rid of some of this white space under it, because when you think about the principles of CARP, that concept of proximity comes to play here. So I'm going to first give a color, and so in this case I'm going to do 033. I'm going to do a font size of 1.4 em. And a lot of this you have to just keep playing with and looking and seeing, is that the desired effect that you were looking for? Then margin, I'm going to do margin of 5 pixels. And then you notice that there's still that white space, and it's because your paragraph tag, I'm going to hit be less specific, Scavenger, is it by default has a margin at top. So I'm going to hit 0. You'll notice that it became a lot closer. So it basically made that space between here and here just 5 pixels, and you can play with it to get it just right. The same way here is this is one chunk, so you want to kind of help improve the proximity. So clicking on the H2 tag, or this is H3, excuse me, I'm going to hit the plus sign, less specific, make sure it's at my external link, and I'm going to do a bottom margin of 5 pixels, and we'll do a top margin of 0. Hit apply. You can see that it just chunked everything nice and neat. So far this is really close. I mean, there's definitely a few things if you compared this to the other that are a little different, but for the most part you can see what I've done. But so what we're going to do now is we're going to look at the footer, because if we look at the example, we did the footer a little differently. So in this case we actually put it outside of the container, outside of the section at least, and has a nice light font, so it's something smaller and not as in your face. And so in that example, I'm going to insert the copyright sign. And so if you go to Insert HTML, Special Characters, Copyright, you'll find it there. Dr. Annie Hung's name, the line, Boise State University, technology. And always be aware that you can and should spell check all your work at the end to make sure everything looks right. So I'm going to go to footer. I'm going to click on the plus sign, less specific, click OK. In the background I'm going to actually do the same one as my body tag, so it kind of blends in a little. But you can see that black font, the contrast is horrible. And so when you think about contrast in the CARP, that you definitely want to improve that. I'm going to put 0.83 em, see what the size looks like. Okay, a little smaller, which is kind of what I'm going for. Going to go to color here, and this is trying to get a right color that's similar. Can be a chore. I tend to use, let's hit apply. I tend to go here, I'll go to this little color wheel, and I will find this, and then I'll drag to find one light. So that tends to be my approach if I'm trying to get that monochromatic kind of feel there. Okay, so I jumped out of it a little too soon. I'm going to go back. I'm going to hit the pencil. By hitting the pencil rather than a new rule, it keeps my code nice and organized. But I want to go down here, and I basically want to add 0 margin. And then I'm going to do 5 pixels for padding. So let's take a look. Okay, so you can see the class has showed up. My video is right there, so it's loading. Let's actually hit pause. And you can play with the settings too with that. You can see that I've done a nice job with my proximity. The links are here in the questions. The footer's there, and you can see the copyright information. So the next step would really be to create my second page and then a link to it. And so the second page, the answer key, should be called Scavenger Answer. And so I'm going to do a save as actually, because I want to keep this basic structure. Make sure it's in my 502 folder. Notice that it's all lowercase. There's no spaces here. And so what I'm going to do here is I'm just going to delete a lot of this text. And so I want the basic structure. For some students, it's easier to start over. That's really up to you. In my case, I know I need some of the basics. I need my header tag, though I'm going to call it something else. I need my section. You can see I deleted my closing section tag. So you got to be careful there. And I also deleted the beginning footer tag. So like I said, for some students, it's just going to be easier to start over. And I deleted my comment. Right? But there, by doing this, it doesn't look like much, but now I can sit here and do copyright. I'm going to change this. Scavenger hunt answer key. And so in my case, I already have all my text already. So imagine if you created this on Word. And so I'm going to make sure I copy and paste it into my section area. Be aware that when you have this paste special option where it will give you some different options here that you can go through. So be aware that you do have that. In this case, I'm going to hit an F there so I have exactly where I want to be, and I'm pasting it in. In this case, it was already formatted, so that looks good. But because it already has this CSS, everything's already applied, right? So that looks great. The last thing I need to do is I need to link back to my other page. So I'm going to go all the way down here, right outside that unordered list. Notice how sometimes I'll just type a little key so I know where I am. So I'm just going to add back. In this case, I'm going to highlight this, and I'm going to go back to the Scavenger page. Now I'm going to go back to this one, do the same thing here, back to my answer key. And I'm looking for answer key, but it's actually named Scavenger Answer. So I'm going to do a file, save all, and I'm going to preview it. So here's my basics. I still would need to add another document, and there's a few other things, but you can see you want to make sure every link works. I can see there's even an error there, so you want to double check everything. But my two things link back and forth. You want to make sure your information's accurate. And so there would always be a few more steps to do, and you can spend some time looking at the example that we've created and provided, and always be aware that, when you right click, whichever way you do it, you can view the source, and so you can see the source here. The goal is not to copy this, but rather to see how the example's been created and to look at the CSS. So hopefully this is enough to get you off and going. We look forward to seeing what you come up with. Thanks.